Hank and I met through a mutual friend, probably a little over 3 years ago. And then we just recently got married this November 7th of 2008.
It didn't take very long for us to know that we were definitely destined for each other. You know, I gotta say that I was so excited because I knew that when Jennifer and I, when we met, I knew that she was gonna be the mother of my child.
We were ecstatic when we found out. We happened to be at my stepmom's painting the house all day long. And then that evening we had found out. I remember we both just sat in the bathroom. I was still taking a bath, and we called all of our family and told them that we were having a baby. I actually had a very easy pregnancy. The initial beginning was a little bit of the nausea, really tired, which was different for me. The 9 months, I mean, it went really smooth. We were still active. We were still vacationing. Really didn't slow us down too much at all.
You know, after the first 2 months, it was great. We did everything like we weren't even pregnant. I mean, it was just, our pregnancy was perfect the whole time, all the way up until we went to the hospital. You know, I was probably more of an annoyance than it was, you know, a help, but I mean, it's great because after you've been through this for 9 months, you know, like, this is your baby, this is your family that you've started, and you know, it's both of our first child, so I mean, it's just the most amazing feeling to know that you're going to be a father.
We first arrived at the hospital, like I said, around 6 in the morning. It was just Hank and I. We were trying just to keep it the two of us for such a special event. Probably by 8, everything was great, going really good. Family started coming, and so it became a pretty big family affair in the room. Everything was still pretty good. I remember the contractions starting pretty hard and close together. They weren't able to really monitor them real close, just with the monitor on my belly. And so I remember them having to kind of switch it up so they could get a better reading. The one thing I do remember is saying, boy, they were really hard and fast, but I felt like nobody believed me. They would just go, oh, okay, yeah, we'll just keep trying to relax. Then once they got it positioned right, you could just see the marks just going off the charts. And I looked at Hank and go, I told you so. So I felt a little relief that, you know, I wasn't being a wimp dealing with all this. But it was a long day. I remember we didn't actually start pushing until probably 6 o'clock at night is when we were ready. And I remember the doctor calling and saying, let's go ahead, let's get her ready, let's get her in and start pushing. And, you know, by that point, after 12 hours of labor, I was exhausted and ready, you know, to have this, see this little boy of ours. And then I think that's where I remember that he was having trouble, and he was sunny side up, what they say. And I just remember him trying to do the forceps. He was having a little difficulty coming out with the pushing. So they had tried that for a couple hours, and then at that point, I think by 10 o'clock at night or so, they said that they wanted to go ahead and just do a C-section just because of the stress from me and the stress on the baby.
You know, she was definitely dilated and definitely ready, but we just couldn't get the head to come through. And so after hours and hours and hours of her pushing, I mean, I just hated to see her go through that much pain. So everything was totally normal. I watched them take the baby out, which was very cool. And they're like, okay, you know, they have somebody behind you so you don't faint. And I was just holding her hand, and I could see it in her face. You can see it in my face, and I watched the whole thing, and it was perfect.
I just remember staring at him, and he was just all bundled up in a little blanket, and he had the little hat on. He had these perfect little heart-shaped lips, and I just remember sitting there with Hank and just staring at him. But we didn't have much time, so they took him away pretty quickly just to go get him cleaned up. He started to feel kind of woozy and not feel very good, and I was telling them that. I could hear all of them talking, and they were talking about the amount of blood, and they were trying to weigh it, and they were paging the doctor again. And then that just alarmed me.
You know what, I bet you it was probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours before that nurse that was keeping me informed actually came back out. She came back out and she told me, she said that things really weren't going that well. They said they want to do some exploratory surgeries to help control the bleeding. And then she took back off again. And then she came back out the next time, and she pulled me aside and said that things really weren't going as well as they should have. They said they wanted to do an emergency hysterectomy, and you know, the baby, of course, was fine, but they told me that my wife probably wasn't going to make it. And so the doctor didn't even have an opportunity to come out. It was a nurse that came out because the doctor was so busy. They came out and asked me if it was okay if they did a hysterectomy, and at this point I really just said, I don't care what happens, I just want my wife back, you know.
The only thing that I remember is waking up in the ICU the following morning, and I remember there was a couple people in the room, and I remember them telling Hank that they were really sorry for our loss. And at that point I didn't know if something had happened to Colton. I knew I was there, but I wasn't sure if something had happened to Colton. I remember Hank saying, you know, that he hadn't told me yet.
You know, early in the morning until the doctor came out. The doctor was probably operating for 7 hours, and they'd called in. The A-team for sure was on call that day because, you know, we definitely got the best of the best working on us. But the doctor told us, you know, they tried closing her up once, and she continued to bleed profusely, and then they closed her up a second time, and they couldn't control the bleeding. And
I was losing a lot of blood, and so they had me go back into surgery for exploratory and to see if they could find out where the bleeding was. All I remember is them saying that I had been in, you know, 3 or so times back from surgery to recovery to surgery to recovery, that they thought that they found the source of the bleeding, and they didn't. But I wasn't initially bleeding then, so I went back to recovery, and they had brought me in 3 more times. The last time they ended up doing a partial hysterectomy, so they had to take my uterus, but left my ovaries. So I just remember that, again, being the hard part of not being able to have any more children.
You know, that was when the doctor finally came out after 5-6 hours of just intensive surgery. And when he came out and he was able to talk with me about what was going on, the A-team was finishing stitching her back up, but he told me, you know, kind of what had happened about her losing so much blood. You know, they just couldn't control the bleeding, and how she had to receive so much blood in order to keep her alive. And I mean, even after being stitched back up, they still had to give her several units of blood. It was horrible. It was horrible. You know, there's no way I'd ever want to raise, you know, the child, my son, our son, without my partner, you know. People can't take that away from you. You know, we're both good people, I think. It's not supposed to happen to good people. But it was definitely tough thing, but you know, just the body, just what Jen had been through was just incredible. I mean, you could tell that she'd been through a lot, receiving the blood and losing the blood, and it was just amazing to see her make sure that she was okay. Then we got to have the baby up there with us, and we got to spend, you know, a couple days up there in critical care.
I knew I was in and out for surgery. At that point, I didn't realize how much blood I'd actually lost, or the risks of losing that much blood had I not been in the hospital, that I wouldn't have made it here today if I didn't have all the blood transfusions and the platelets there that day. We would just like to thank everybody that had taken time out of their day or had done a blood drive for a reason of their own, but we're just very thankful that people took that opportunity to donate blood. And you know, they say that donate blood saves a life, and in this situation it certainly did for my family sitting here right here. And not even just the blood donors, it's I had just gave blood again for my second time on Tuesday, and it's for all those people that work there in, you know, the blood bank or in the bus that comes around, the blood drive mobile, and it's just thanking each of them for the time that they put in for such a serious cause as well. You know, as easy as the pregnancy was and as hard as the delivery was, that I have one and he's perfect and beautiful and we have our family.